we recently talked about how the Fed is going to make us rich. Now, that might be a broad statement. You might even say, well, Nick, that's just clickbait. However, all of the factors around what the Fed is doing currently, if we compare it to previous cycles, it has led to prices in this market going absolutely parabolic and melting faces. I don't believe that this time around is different. In fact, I do believe that we are going to see that same exact reaction, but on a bigger scale. Let's take a quick look at the market today, because this is the current daily view. XRP up 6.7%, HBAR up 3.6%. We also have a ton of other altcoins up in a big way. XLM is up 3.5%. There's a few altcoins bouncing in a big way, as you guys can see, from the 9% push, the 5.2% push, the 4.8% push. It's a great gain across the board. Now, if we're also looking into that, we look at where Bitcoin is at, 111K, Ethereum at almost 4K. There really isn't a big change on both of those. However, XRP, $2 and almost 60 cents, up 6.9% today compared to Ethereum's 1.8% and Bitcoin's 0.8%. Looking at Bitcoin, we are still in this wedge. We're waiting for something to happen here. Obviously, if we are starting to, trade to the upside, yeah, we could retest the bottom trend line again and just kind of squeeze here before we finally get that big break to the upside. Yeah, that wouldn't be, a crazy thing to happen. It's been happening multiple times over in the past as well, which led to all-time highs. But right now, just really kind of looking at Bitcoin on the lower time frame structure, on the 4-hour at least, things do not look too bad here. We are still looking very good in terms of structure, even on the 1 day, right? We still have that higher low in place. We just closed at a higher high, technically going off of the candle body closes. I would love for us to break over 114K, but, the structure on Bitcoin looks very, very good here. And outside of Bitcoin, of course, with Ethereum, very similar situation, except we're just kind of squeezing a little bit tighter here. We might still get that rejection, right? We just need to be cautious here. But however, I still think that we have that much larger move to the upside. And also, looking at this even on the 24-hour span, although yes, technically we do have a lower low going off of the lows from the 17th and the 18th, I'm still watching to see if we could break over those previous highs, which would also correlate with us breaking over this upper trend line, which would be very bullish, and that would create a higher high. But again, lower time frame structure is still telling us that Ethereum is looking very good. And then outside of that, XRP, which everyone wants to know about, yeah, XRP is very bullish. I don't know if this is up to date. Let me refresh real quick. Looking at this on the 4-hour, I was drawing the trend lines, and we essentially just broke out of the trend lines on this chart, which is very, very bullish to see, because again, it's clearly showing us that XRP is starting to form very bullish structure, especially on the 4-hour. We have our low down here, we have our higher low, we have our recent high. Again, lower highs. We just broke over the previous high, which created bullish structure. Now we need to break over the highs up here, which would, correlate with the $2.64 XRP, which would be very bullish if we could start to flip that. That would also align, on the daily for a breakout, essentially, to begin. It would have us reclaiming the highs going back to May, and that would put us on a path to retesting, the highs around like $2.73, which would also have us flipping major support on the XRP chart. So again, lower time frame wise, this is a very good move, but we can't get too far ahead of ourselves here, and we need to just watch and really kind of wait for, XRP to really have a much larger break. By the way, we just did see stocks make a new all-time high, which was also extremely bullish as well. And they closed out the week on an all-time high as well. This is because we have been starting to see a lot of big updates around tariffs, around the trade war, and also what the Fed has been really kind of hinting at and what big banks have been telling us. If what they're saying is true, well, we are in for a much larger rally in this market. But let's first start off with the China tariffs, right? Here we have Trump's China tariffs spark $19 billion in Bitcoin liquidations, endangering October streak. So Bitcoin has fallen 6% in October of 2025, risking its first negative month since 2018, after historically averaging 20% gains. President Donald Trump 100% tariffs on Chinese software imports escalated U.S.-China trade tensions, leading to a 14% Bitcoin price drop and a $19 billion crypto liquidation on October 10th through the 11th. With a week left, the market anticipates the Federal Reserve's October 29th meeting for possible rate cuts, while quarter four's strong historical performance provides some optimism. Now, going off of these two posts here we have Bitcoin Archive, right? Bitcoin's average quarter four returns 78.66%. Current quarter four returns is negative 2.48%. A lot of catching up to do in November and December. And again, if we're thinking about this, right, and we're going back to the typical October performance, here we have from Cointelegraph, alert, Bitcoin's October may turn red for the first time in 8 years. Retweet if you are rooting for a Moon-Vember. Now, if we're looking at this, let me open this up in a new tab just so that you guys can really see it. If we're going off of October, typically it's very bullish. The only time that we've experienced a bearish October was back in 2018 and 2014. I still think that we finished out the month of October in the green. If we're looking at Bitcoin on the 1 month, this is what we are currently looking at. Let me just remove everything off this chart. So this is what we are currently, seeing right now on the chart. In my opinion, this looks like a bull flag. It looks as though we are in a bull flag formation. It really wouldn't take us much to get to a new high here and close out the month in the green. It seems as though we are just consolidating between 108K to about roughly 116K, at least on the monthly view. If we are looking at this from our current level, it would only take roughly a 5% push to end off the month in the green. I personally think that we see this happen, especially with what's upcoming. What's upcoming, you may ask? Well, let's talk about it. Let's first start off with what JP Morgan recently said. So JP Morgan expects the Federal Reserve to end quantitative tightening next week. JP Morgan forecasts Fed to halt quantitative tightening at October FOMC meeting. JP Morgan Chase strategists predict the Federal Reserve will end its QT program during the October 28th and the 29th FOMC meeting, stopping the monthly runoff of up to $95 billion in securities to address money market strains and stabilize banking reserves. This view is shared by Bank of America and Evercore analysts, with markets reacting positively as U.S. stock futures rise and Bitcoin surpasses 100K. The shift, initiated in June of 2022 to curb inflation, could introduce fresh liquidity and precede further rate cuts amid ongoing liquidity pressures. And again, it's not just JP Morgan, right? It's Bank of America, but also Deutsche Bank. They now are seeing the Fed announcing QT's end next week as well. If this happens, we are in for a massive rally. We also have an update, which I did include in a previous video where I was talking about how the Fed is going to make us rich. This is from the Coastal Journal. Breaking, the Fed QE begins. The Fed's balance sheet increases by $10 billion in 2 weeks. The Fed discount window usage, aka lender of last resort, shoots up 238% year over year. This all comes after banks are announcing losses and collateral issues. This is also at the same exact time that banks are now predicting that the Fed is going to end QT next week. If this is true, which it seems as though it's going to be, especially considering the fact that the Fed is already showing signs that QE is beginning, the markets are going to roar higher, much higher. This would also align with the October, close being extremely green. We also have over here from TFTC, the Fed's reverse repo facility is collapsing. When it hits zero, liquidity returns and Bitcoin takes off. And if we're looking at this chart, okay, look at the bottom, right? Especially going back to the end of 2020. That's when this thing was essentially bottomed out completely. Then going into 2021, this started to absolutely skyrocket. This led to Bitcoin going parabolic. Just to give you guys a quick update, let's go back to 2020 into 2021. Here's the end of 2020. Here's 2021. Bitcoin ended out the year in just October at about 11K. By the end of March into roughly like the middle of April, we hit $64,000. We are in for a massive rally across the board. Going off of these stats here, and with what the Fed has been hinting at, and with what's already happening on the Fed charts, it's telling us that the Fed is about to flip and end QT with QE beginning at the same exact time that we do get rate cuts. We are currently 4 days and, like roughly 16 hours out from the next FOMC meeting. CME Group is highlighting that during the October 29th meeting, there is a 98.3% chance of a rate cut happening. And December, there's a 99.9% chance of a rate cut. We are about to witness the Fed begin QE and QT and cut rates twice to end off the year. This is an extremely bullish environment. We have here from the Kabaisi letter breaking the odds of 2 more interest rate cuts in 2025 surged to a record high of 85%. As the data blackout continues, labor market deteriorates, and the CPI comes in cooler than expected, the Fed must cut rates. There is no other option. And yeah, the environment right now that the Fed is tackling, it's highlighting the fact that we need to end QT, we need to start QE, we need to cut rates, and we need to rush in liquidity. This is going to cause these markets to experience an uproar in price action. We're going to see these charts go absolutely crazy, especially going into next week. I would 100% prepare for volatility because we will see volatility, but we should start to see a lot of these charts really picking up in a big way. But it's very clear that Bitcoin has essentially been consolidating since that massive low, and we could drop this a little bit lower on the 24-hour span, but we have been consolidating within this range for quite some time. We're just waiting for that big push to the upside. The FOMC meeting could be the day that we start to see that. And on top of that, you might be asking, well, Nick, what about the China situation? We already got a big update that on October 30th, the White House announced that President Trump will meet with China's President Xi. This is 48 hours before the 100% tariff increase on China is set to go live. I would bet on the fact that we most likely see a trade deal before November 1st. It wouldn't, surprise me. It wouldn't shock me at all. But we are about to witness some pretty big updates around this market. And I would argue that the entire environment around this market is starting to really flip extremely bullish at a time where the crypto market is still pretty fearful. We're at about 34 in terms of the fear and greed index. So I am locked in on what's about to happen next week. We are, again, just 4 days out, from the next FOMC meeting. Definitely prepare for this. I would have stablecoins on the sidelines. I would not be acting impulsively here at all. And just buckle up for some volatility to hit the market in a big way. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.